We're going to look at another example of group data, and we're going to try to find the mean, median, and mode, the measures of central tendency for this group data. Now this is a little bit different. So this is our MLB data, our wins that are put into a frequency distribution table. And last time we talked about, in a previous video, we talked about how to create a histogram for this grouped data. But let's pretend that we don't have the original data to reference. We just have this summary of the data. So first, let's talk about what each of these columns means, and let's fill out some of the rest of these columns. So we have our lower class limit. This is our starts at our min, and our upper class limit of our last class should end at our maximum, or at least include our maximum. And so we went up by tens, and when we went up by 10, we were able to include all of our values. And what we talked about last time is we use this midpoint, which is the average of these two numbers, to create the midpoint here. And this is saying that there are 4 numbers in my data set that are between 52 and 61. They're including 61 and 52. There are 3 numbers in our data set between 62 and 71. There are 8 numbers between 72 and 81, and so on and so forth. The problem is, unlike this previous example where we knew that there were exactly 19 twos, all we know is that there are 8 values between 72 and 81, but we don't know what those values are. I could have 3 73s and 5 80s, or I could have 172, 173, 174, 175, and 4 78s. There's no knowing. We can't tell exactly what these 8 values are. All we know is that these 8 values are between 72 and 81. So what we do to find the mean, which is not going to match up exactly with the mean that we found here, 80.967, what we're going to do is we are going to pretend that all 3 of these numbers that are between 62 and 71 are the number 66.5. And we're going to pretend that all 7 of these numbers that are between 82 and 91 are all 86.5. And that's how we're going to calculate the mean. But first, before we do that, let's talk about what relative frequency and cumulative frequency is. So relative frequency is how big this number is compared to the total number of numbers in my data set. So I know that there are 30 numbers. That's for the 30 teams that are in the MLB. And so, is 4 a big number? I don't know. Let's compare it with the total number of numbers. Now, the total number of numbers, I want to stay constant. So when I'm finding the relative frequency, I'm going to do 4 divided by 30. But then when I drag down this formula, I also want to do 3 divided by 30, and 8 divided by 30, and 7 divided by 30. I don't want this number to move. So what I did was, after I selected the cell, I hit function 4, F4 on my keyboard. And F4 puts a $ in front of the column letter and the row number. And by doing that, it locks the reference to this cell in my calculation. So now you'll notice when I drag this down, in this column, now it's referencing the 3 because I dragged it down and I didn't lock the reference to that calculation, but it's still referencing 30. And in this column, it's referencing the 8 divided by 30. And here it's the 7 divided by 30. So when I dragged it down, the things that I didn't lock, using the dollar sign kept moving down. The variable that I wanted to stay constant, the thing that I wanted to stay constant, stayed constant because I locked it, the reference to it. So no matter how far I drag down, this reference is going to stay the same. And now we know that 27% of the values were between 72 and 81. Cumulative frequency is I'm adding as I go. So I'm going to sum all the numbers that have come so far. And I did this at the end of the last video too. I'm going to lock the first cell, again, function 4, F4. So now as I drag down, this first cell will stay locked, but then the second cell that determines the range here will move down as I drag it. And so what happens is 4 plus 3 gives me 7, and then 4 plus 3 plus 8 gives me 15, and 4 plus 3 plus 8 plus 7 gives me 22, plus 6 plus 2. And whenever you do the cumulative frequency, the last number in that row should be the same as n being the sample size for your data. All right, so I want to find the mean. What I'm going to do is down here, I'm going to reference my midpoint because that's the value. We're saying that all the numbers that are between 52 and 61 actually have a value of 56.5. We know that probably isn't true, but that's how we're going to do it because it's all we can do. And basically what I'm doing here is I'm just copying my data without having to copy it really. So I'm going to copy over, and then I'm going to copy down. Oops. And I don't need this, I went too far. So these are my values, these are my x's, and this is my frequency. This is how many times each of these x's occurred. So just like we did over here, now we're back to this situation where we have our value and our frequency. This is our value and our frequency. So in this column, we are going to multiply the value by the number of times the value happens, and that's how much. So there were 4 teams that had 56.5 wins that contributed 226 wins to all of the wins that happened during 2021. And so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do to find the mean is first I'm going to sum up this column. That's the total number of wins. And if we want to know the average wins per team, I also need to know the total number of teams. There are 30 teams, 2,435 wins for 30 teams is an average of 2,435 wins for 30 teams averages out to 81.17, which is basically one win higher than the actual. It's actually less than 1 win. It's actually only 0.2. It's only 0.2 of a win higher. So without actually having the original data, just assuming that every value in each class was the midpoint of that class, we still came pretty close to the average of our data set, which isn't bad. So this is our mean for our group data. Now, how do I find the median? Now, it's possible that we won't be able to do this. And actually, in this case, we can't, because we don't know what value the 4 numbers in this data set are. So we know there's 30 teams, so our median would be between the 15th and the 16th. So it would be between whatever the last number in this class is and the first number in this class. But we don't know what the last number in this class is. We were assuming it was 76.5. And we don't know what the first number is in this class. We were assuming it was 86.5. So I guess if I average these two, that's 81.5. I could say the median is 81.5, but we don't typically do that. But if we were to do that, we do notice that 81.5 is really close to the mean here, just like in the original data, 81 was really close to the mean. The mode, again, we know that the most values happened in this class, but we don't know what those values are. So we really can't say for sure what the median or the mode is. All we can find is the mean. I'll see you in the next video, and where we're going to talk about spread, measures of spread. And namely, the spread is standard deviation is what we're going to talk about.